so much. I mean, it was overwhelmingly seen by people, both in July of last year and then again April this year. Two different filmings. This last production was actually filmed with a film crew and that kind of stuff, and it was just an overwhelming reaction, which rendered me 34 glowing reviews. I mean, you know, I never left my house. I've never left this. This was all done via Zoom, like we are here. And yet I managed to revive a play that was written and staged back in 2006. But and the actress, Fabiana Gugli, was at her house in Sao Paulo. And it was all done there. The place based on Liebestod, on the last aria sang by Isolde in Tristan and Isolde by Richard Wagner. And it's exactly about this period. It's about being locked up in a dressing room, not being able to leave because there's another singer taking over her part. But the idea of claustrophobia, the idea of being locked in without being able to move, speaking her mind off to a swan, is what the play was. And I think it struck, this is precisely why I think the audience saw it, because they saw themselves in it. It struck that personal note with people. So rather than go off and stage these, you know, huge things where people are just wondering what is going on, you know, and this metaphorical, metaphysical theater with meta language being the core center of it all. This was a almost realistic production where people could actually really relate to. And
wow, that's impressive.
And it's not very optimistic, but you know, Frank, the thing is, I've always been very critical of what we call theater. On the other hand, I love the idea of the ritual. You know, we meet at a place, we have the camaraderie of the group. The audience has to do the same. To leave the house, park the car, meet at a specific place, and enjoy or hate, experience the production together. Together. It's a social event. Here, it's an individual thing, and it's never going to work. First of all, because it's a flat screen, and there aren't many possibilities. Plus, the attention span is not the same. You know that in the theater, you breathe together with the actors. It's like a big lung. It's a heart and a lung beat, you know. And here, you can go off, get a Coca-Cola in the fridge, or get an ice cream, come back, and the play's still rolling. So in other words, it's not very different from watching a movie via YouTube or Netflix or something. It's happening regardless of the audience. And I love the interference of the audience when they cough and when they produce noise. In one production at the Cuvillier Theater in Germany, during my production of Sturmspiel, which is the Tempest with Endgame by Beckett, 200 out of 800 people, 200 got up together like it was a rehearsed thing, turned their backs to the audience and marched out of the theater. And it's a Baroque theater with wooden floors, so you could hear the footsteps vibrating in the theater. I think it's a glorious experience, really fantastic.
Yeah, so it provoked something in them. They made a decision to get up. Listen, I have a question. If I understood right, you left school early. You studied yourself in libraries, and to finance your life and your young kid, you drove ambulances. What was going through your mind when you heard the ambulances last year? And I'm sure you heard in your location many of them.
Yeah, I live across from Bellevue and NYU, and they go all the time. I mean, it's like a constant siren. Thank God my windows are very thick and block the noise off, but it was pretty horrible. And in the building, I could see it. I live in a huge building, and you could see the elevator always stuck on the floor because a gurney or, you know, some kind of a stretcher would be collecting an old person who would be going out, and then you'd never see them again. So you know exactly what happened. But the ambulance was one of the few things I did. I did a lot of stuff. Like, I guess, a lot of young artists have to do a lot of stuff in order to support themselves. I mean, I wasn't in the professional theater. I started here in New York doing something maybe I shouldn't talk about, but I was a kid for hire, so to speak, you know. And so in London, at the age of 16, I started reading everything possible at the British Museum Library, which is where Marx wrote Das Kapital and so on. But I was a coffee taster by profession, which really is an insanity. An ambulance driver. I was a chef's assistant, of course, or you could say dishwashing liquid assistant, or I was an international telephone operator. You had to stick in those things, you know, depending on the country that the person was asking. So it's, you know, I got married very early. I was married very early, so I had to support this thing called marriage, family.
How did you connect to La Mama and Alan Stewart? How did you get there from driving the ambulances in London?
When I moved back from London to New York, I'm not sure exactly how I got connected to the company called Mabum Mines. Lee Brewer, Ruth Malachek, Philip, and Fred Newman. And so I ended up being part of a production of The Tempest at the Delacorte Theater in 1981, exactly 40 years ago now, with all these people, Raul Julia, you know, playing the role of Prospero. And little by little, I started wanting to do workshops. My relationship with Joe Papp was going very badly because he wanted me to do all these Polish political plays, and that was not what was you know, I want to do Beckett. I want to do more, you know, metalinguistic theater. And so Ellen picked me up, and Ellen said, "Well, do a couple of workshops. You know, teach people how to speak with an English accent. This, you know, this kind of stuff." And then one day I said, "Ellen, I'm ready with a production if you want me to stage it." And it happened to be Samuel Beckett's world premiere of All Stranger Way, which opened January of 1984. I was 29 years old. And then I got to know Beckett personally. I started working with Beckett in Paris in 1984, 85, 86, and not until he died, because I stopped seeing him for a while. But I got to do all these adaptations of Beckett prose. And then for some kind of it really is a coincidence, because when my intendant, the artistic director of the Bayerische Stadt, of the State Theater in Munich, was Günther Belitz. He had hired me. And I said to him, "Well, why not do Waiting for Godot?" You know, this was when Beckett was still alive. You being German, you know that things begin 2 years in advance, you know, with the sets and all that. So it was also almost an unfortunate thing that Beckett died, and a month later we were opening Godot at the Cuvillier Theater again. So it seemed like you know, I was an opportunist who seized the opportunity to do something because Beckett was dead. It wasn't. It was planned in advance. But so I've also done Endgame, the traditional so-called plays. They're not very interesting for me because I do the prose. I do the internal, you know, dialogue of what Beckett is thinking and putting out. And that's the way he was as a person. He spoke that way. He actually spoke that way. I used to go to Paris to meet him. He spoke that way.
Well, one could argue that that the oeuvre, the work of Beckett is, you know, also concerned is we will all die. We know that. We've been reminded now by something that we all try to ignore, especially America does try to ignore. But what do we do before we die? What is worth doing?
It's a great.
How do you connect that idea of Beckett and Corona time? Did it get a new urgency for you, or was it a confirmation?
Yeah, I mean, I think theater deals with death. This is what we deal with. I mean, go back to Shakespeare, it's all about death, it's all about dying. All the Renaissance writers write about death. And go back to Chaucer, it's all about death. It's all about death with Plato and Sophocles. It's all about death. It's all about our ability to transcend this monster called death, or accept it and just lie there like Finnegan's Wake or Malone Dies or one of those things. So this, we go, I think in the theater, we die every night when the curtain closes. And it's no wonder the stagehands who keep the props, they're called grave diggers for a good reason. We die every time the curtain closes. There's a kind of a, you know, you can only talk about the experience you've just had. You can never really communicate it unless you do a play again the next day, so you're alive again. Here we just have this idea, and I think, you know, let me just say this. I think the best translator in my time of this thing called death is Thaddeus Cantor. His theater was about the living dead, so to speak, these people circulating almost like sculptures, you know, covered in dust, almost like post 9/11 in a way. And I lived, see, my relationship with death is ambiguous, like, because most of my family was exterminated in concentration camps in Germany. And so, you know, at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I would hear about Auschwitz, Dachau, Buchenwald, the whole lot of concentration camps and who died and how they died. And of course, I used to live in Williamsburg, which is kind of opposite across. I got the clear view. I used to have a clear view of the World Trade Center. And I saw the planes hit the buildings in real time and the collapse in real time. So that was a second idea of, my goodness, it's very close. It's very close. So there's a mechanical thing that takes over. I think you're right. Americans don't want to deal with death, and so it's always a happy ending. It's always a sugary thing, sugar-coated ending. But Europeans, on the other hand, are exactly the opposite. They dwell on death. So all the operas, especially Wagner, it's all about who dies and how they die and how long they take to die on stage, how much they can sing while they're dead already. But this is typical Schopenhauer. It's typical nihilism. It's, you know, it's typical Nietzsche and Wagner. Actually, it's although I think probably Nietzsche is a little bit more optimistic with the eternal return and all that. But the Corona thing. So the second part of the question, how I first of all, I don't really believe we're over it right now. You know, like you said, the theater might come back, but how is it? And if we take just one example, Broadway, for instance, where the producer needs a packed house, or at least 85% of the audience, paid audience, sitting there. If it's going to be one seat with two intermittent seats empty, meaning a third of the theater, he's not going to make a profit. So he can't pay anybody. So unless the unions come down from the platform and make a deal, say, well, no, we're going to work for nothing, or we no longer work for $75 an hour, we work for 10, and the actors do the same, and it becomes a team effort, which might happen. It might happen. It's like a war situation, a team effort where there are no classes, where everyone feels like they're part of the enterprise. Well, maybe then. Otherwise, the industry as we know it doesn't stand a chance at the moment, because you can't sit, you will never be able to sit next to the other person, you know, within breathing, spitting distance. And that's precisely the fun of the theater, because you're being manipulated from the left and the right and the back, and from the front you have this magnificent thing which is unreal, this world opening up to you by actors and directors and musicians. So it's a very unlikely situation. So what we should do, in my opinion, is not read the papers every day and put New York One on and listen to what Cuomo is saying about opening up, what the de Blasio opening up. Yeah, it'll open up. It's opening up gradually, but we shouldn't take it personally. The theater is not going to open up so soon. You know, maybe give it another year. Let these architects and engineers think of a alternative to the distribution of audiences. You know, groups of people, triple vaccinated, quadruple vaccinated. I don't know what it's going to be, but you talked about the Delta variant in the UK. Yeah, there are going to be variants. I mean, there are, you know, with the Yemen, there are countries in the world who that don't even have a vaccine. And these people, when they travel, they will bring it. And so there's no question that this is a mutant virus, which we don't seem to accept. It's a mutant. There was a Brazilian variant, there was a South African variant, now Indian variant, and the UK variant to begin with. There's a percentage of us who will be immune due to this acquired the herd immunity, this thing that we collectively acquire. But I think that exposing us, the audience, to a closed-in environment called theater, you know, maybe an open-air amphitheater. Yeah, well, that's like the Delacorte in Central Park. Maybe that's the alternative. Take all the roofs off the theaters and let it happen. Maybe, but you know, that darkness, the black box, and that kind of spectacle to, you know, because the director, as you know, the director wants to be God, wants to control the climate, wants to control the atmosphere, the amount of light that comes in. So it's not like a rock concert, which you can do at midday, you know, with the sun blasting on everyone. It's about the brain of the director. It's about the concept, as we call it. And that is not open to weather. It doesn't rain in the theater unless you make it rain, right? It's not light in the theater unless you turn on the light. So it is it's Genesis happening, the biblical idea of Genesis happening, the Fiat Lux idea of Genesis happening every day in the theater. Well, that will change.
Yeah, and also, you know, so 80 to 85% are tourists or people driving into New York, and at the moment we have very, very few of them, if any. You worked in so much in Germany, in Brazil, and also UK, and big stages. What do you think about American theater? What's right and what's wrong about it?
I don't divide theater up into nationalities, you know, simply because I'm always surprised by what I see when I least expect it. I can give you an example. I was in Zagreb, Croatia in 1999 as a guest production of Nowhere Man. And I was invited to see a production it was an adaptation of Julius Caesar by Shakespeare. And it was by a production conceived and directed by Branko Brezovic, a local Croatian Serbian director. He utilized on stage one or two actors from all the different parts of former Yugoslavia, from Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, Slovenia and all that. So the language wasn't important, but the performance was so magnificent, and it was so much about the fall of the Roman Empire, and it was so much like and I thought, all these fat men had high heels on with little rabbit shoes, and I never expected to see anything like that in Zagreb, but I did. So German theater, American theater, I think what we can say is that Broadway, the musical idea of Broadway, is a fantastic American response to the stagnant German Italian opera, where people, basically fat singers, stand in one position where they can see the conductor and they can project their voices, but they don't move. And if they have to move because this annoying creature called the director told them to move, they resent it and they don't do it well. That idea of singing for 45 minutes, sometimes an aria can last 45 minutes, even more, is boring, let's face it. Even for the theater goers who are fanatic about opera, if you don't know what's going on, and if you don't read the libretto in the program notes, you don't know what it's about, because nobody understands what the singers are singing in the German opera. In the Italians, because of the amount of consonants, you can understand a little more. But so I think at one point somebody from with a culture, with an education of musical theater, said, enough. We'll make it into an adventure. We'll use the opera codes, the codifications of the opera, but we'll make it really exciting. We'll do dance, and we'll do this happen. And the set is going to change, which Wagner already did with the Gesamtkunstwerk thing. There's transformation music written for set changes, but it's not usual. It's not usual. So I don't know what American theater is. Is it Tennessee Williams? Is it Bob Wilson doing Heiner Müller, or is it Trisha? I mean, I don't really understand that kind of stuff, and I don't divide it up into nationalities. What I do, see, I have to tell you a little bit about my personal story, why I ended up in Brazil. It's because it's almost like a prophecy. When I was directing Julian Beck, he was terminally ill. He was about to die.
For the Beckett, for the Beckett work.
Beckett trilogy, yeah. And so, I mean, we did an incredible run at La Mama, and then we went to Frankfurt, to Theater am Turm in Frankfurt, where, by the way, Richard Schechner saw us. And he said to me, whenever I picked him up at 98th Street and West Van Avenue to bring him down to the theater, he said, you have to leave New York, Do what
Julian Beck said that.
Julian, yeah. Julian said, leave New York and do exactly what you do here, but do it in Brazil. Do it on a huge scale. They have the money to do it, and they would love this kind of based on absurdist, maybe, theater, where you just put in ideas, and you leave it up to the audience to, think about it later. And he said, well, build a household name for yourself, and then come back to New York. And I'm sure that the New York Times will give you a full cover page, front page, exactly like it happened. When I came back with the company, with the Kafka trilogy, the Times cultural section, the Arts and Leisure, stamped us on a huge cover, giving us, and that projected us to the world. Next thing was the Vienna Festival, and then from there on, we went. And so I started doing things on a bigger stage in the world as well. Because, as you know, La Mama is tiny. Basically, you can't do anything. The seating is very low. But in New York, what it did in a way, is in New York, when you belong to a bubble group, the so-called experimental theater people, downtown theater, it's downtown and it's poor, and there's a team effort. There's almost like an ideology, and all you want to do is you want to receive an obie given out by the Village Voice. You want to be reviewed and liked by the Voice. You don't care about the mainstream New York Times. You want a picture of yourself in the Soho News or the East Village, whatever it's called. And the world tells you, you can get out of this bubble. And it certainly did for me, because I started winning all these awards I never thought in my life would be possible. Mainstream Molière prizes, 3 of them, all of a sudden, Molière prize. So I blame people who want to be part of small groups of people and live inside of a bubble that has its own verbology, terminology, and ways of communicating, because it never breaks out, and it never wants to really communicate with a larger amount of people. And it's the same thing with Broadway. It's about entertainment. It's not about thinking. Don't even think about it. Every production that deals with the deep ideas of philosophical ideas about life and death will fail. They do. I did. I failed on Broadway because my production was taken to 42nd Street. My Beckett production was taken to 42nd Street. Well, the same critic who had loved it at La Mama, given it a glowing review, gave it a glowing review again. And the last line said, well, unfortunately, I can't recommend it to my Broadway theater goers. Well, that killed it. That was the end of it. You know, so I mean, it makes you wonder why in the West End in London, well, the National Theatre, the Old Vic is they're part of the West End, and the Barbican Centre, they stage daring productions. Well, they even stage Krapp's Last Tape, or you know, stuff like that. Well, you don't see it ever here. You don't see it. It's a safer way of conducting the industry. It's about safety. It's about money. Really is about money. It's about ending so that you can catch Saudis around the corner to have dinner. It's a coordinated effort. So the bus is waiting for that crowd outside Saudis so they can be bussed back to the hotel. It's a moving mechanism, which you don't have enough. It doesn't exist in other countries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you see as a future of theater? A theater that has some kind of urgency. You know, I think Philip Glass talked about your theater as an adrenaline theater, and you were this ambulance driver. And somehow, when I look at your clips, I saw, you know, you have a feeling there's an urgency. You're signaling through the flames. What do you think is a theater that would be meaningful, that makes a contribution right now? What do we need?
When you live inside of a theater called life, you don't need theater, because what is happening politically after Donald Trump, we started living this farce of a life where the protagonist was an orange man with orange hair, speaking the dumbest possible things, being a thief, you know, basically being the CEO liar of the country, or the liar in chief. Well, but he is always interesting to watch. You know, I mean, it's amazing to watch bits and pieces of his rallies, because he commands the audience better than any actor I have known, even John Gielgud. So this lying, horrible conspiracy theorist, he's not even a Republican at heart. He was a Democrat 20 years ago. He paid for Bill Clinton's campaign. So, you know, he doesn't stand it. He's an opportunist. But we live in a post-Trumpian world, which divided, as you know, the country into really half and half. And after the insurrection attempt on January 6th, it really divided up even further. But that is theater as well. That is theater. That is Shakespearean tragedy in real life. That is a Pirandello play in real life. That's a Calderón de la Barca play in real life. So you have that. When you watch the news on TV, when you read it in the papers, you no longer trust the left, the right, the center, anything. You have to make up your own mind, which is what theater really is about. So we live in a theatrical world. It may not be the theater that you would have chosen, that I would have chosen, but nevertheless, it is a theatrical world. And so we, the theater people, need time to digest this thing, you know, and to regurgitate back something that is an adequate response on equal terms, or even stronger, like a good tennis match. Because we were caught off guard. We were caught off guard by this son of a bitch called Trump. And so, and all this, all these maniacs, these you know, organizations, white supremacists and all that, which have been around for a long time, but this time stronger than ever. So we should use the opportunity of being alone and brooding and thinking about the future and so on, not to come up with theatrical ideas, but we should concentrate on thinking philosophically what the possibilities could be. And that's not thinking about a play, 2 plays, or 3 plays. It's about our existence, or maybe not, but it's certainly, we have to find and re-cement the foundations of our lives. We've been cut from our foundations. The building is wobbly because it no longer has the pylons that to hold it up. That has been cut off. And of course, because we are liberals in the theater, to half of America, meaning 150 million people, we are the bad guys right now because we're in the liberal arts. So it's a great opportunity to take us a back seat and think, well, there must be a way out. After the Inquisition, there was a way out. After the McCarthy era, there was a way out. After each repressive era, the Spanish and the Portuguese and the Latin Americans and even Germany after the Third Reich had to come up with an answer about what to do. So maybe Brecht was the answer during and after the Third Reich, but each country found its own solution to that repressiveness. Here, I find it equally the same. It's a repressive force coming from the outside, whether it's in the form of a virus or a virus coupled up with an ideology. It's the same thing. We are forced to take a back seat, and it's affected all of us equally.
Hmm. Did you dream something up?
Did I what?
Did you dream something up? Did you think of something in that year?
Yeah, I mean, believe it or not, I'm writing plays, and one of the plays I'm writing is called Traitor, from treason and betrayal, because I feel that we as humans have been betrayed by a force of nature and by ourselves, because we communicate the virus to other people. We become the enemy. I remember the beginning of the mask wearing thing, the instructions of the CDC, the social distancing, mask wearing. The streets of New York were empty. I used to go out here on 23rd Street. I couldn't see a single soul. And whenever we did see somebody coming our way, we would hide our faces, meaning that person, no matter who he was the enemy. So only a traitor, somebody capable of betraying the system, will come out the winner. So I'm writing I'll show you. These are the books, and I'm writing a sequel to all of them. It gives me time to reposition myself. Think about Britain during the Blitzkrieg, during the bombs falling. Everyone had to rethink life, and even in Germany too. I mean, the Germans being Dresden being bombarded, but the inhabitants of Dresden were not responsible for the Third Reich, but they were being bombed. Or Hiroshima, Nagasaki, each of those. That is their life afterwards. Well, I went to Hiroshima in 1999. Back to life. Trees growing, people living, buses going, taxis, restaurants open. You think, wow, in a place where there was this mass destruction, killed almost everyone, burnt everything to the ground. Yeah, it's back. I think we will always come back, Frank. We are undefeatable phoenixes. No matter the amount of ashes, we make a comeback because it's our nature. And that's why I think the theater is an important thing, because theater reflects the nature that we are. Our weaknesses and our strengths at the same time. That's the wonderful contradiction about theater. We can place both on stage, but not always within one generation or 25, not even 2. It takes time, which is something we are not used to, because the internet gives us quick answers to everything. Google this and it's on your screen and you forget it within minutes. But if we only think, well, all right, so this time it's different, and it is different because it's the first pandemic in 100 years. So we, we don't know anybody who lived through the last pandemic and told us the story. But maybe it was the same after 1918. After 1919 or 18 came the 1929 crash, and then the uprising of the Third Reich, and then the war. Think about all that and how much of art was important to huge amounts of civilizations being destroyed. Well, my father tells me there was no need for art, and that was in the middle of Germany. My mother tells me there was no need for art. We looked at Rembrandt, on the wall. There was no need to be reminded of Goya's Black Period, eating a child. There was no need for any kind of a grotesque approach, which is what we do. We are grotesque people. We reveal the grotesqueness in the human race. Well, when they are living that on a daily basis, they don't need to be reminded of it because their skin tells the full story. I'm sorry to be so grim.
No, that's very important. So in a way, you might say we are still in a time where we do not need art, but we have to think, we have to prepare.
How much of us, and I include myself, how much of us really take our ego and our creative ability to the seat called existential questions, or maybe Sigmund Freud or Jung or you name it, Lacan. How much of us really question everything we do in a very serious manner? There was no time because tomorrow morning the agent will be calling, is it ready? We need to rehearse in 3 weeks. It has to be ready in 6 weeks and has to be on a stage in Hamburg at the Thalia Theater or at Kampnagel in a matter of 2 months. There was never time to do anything. We were always tied up with money, production costs, cut it by 2 days, travel costs. I remember when a set of mine came from New York and it got lost in Hamburg. It went to Johannesburg and said, oh, what do you do without a set? Well, you have to do it. It'll take time to come from Johannesburg to Hamburg. So the improvisational aspect is questionable, but it is also an existential act, which we need to exercise. I think for a long time we've been automats, we've been robots geared by a mechanical need to produce. Now, there is no such thing. So sit on your fucking ass and think about a proper, strong response to the human questions which arise from a pandemic. There is no need for an answer tomorrow or by September or by November. We shouldn't put a date on these things. How can you put a date on anything? It doesn't have, the only things that should have a date are vaccines. I need it ready by then, so work your asses off. So science maybe has a date, but this is a very intricate mechanism which does not always respond to pressure.